Hey guys, what's up? This is Autobot JCB here, coming to you with my picks for my top 10 Minicons for the Transformers Armada series. This is actually going to be part one of 3 parts that I'm going to do for this channel. What I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to be going over my top 10 picks for my partnered Minicon characters. So characters like Sparkplug, Leader 1, ones that are known to be partnered with either the Autobots or Decepticons. In part 2, I'm going to be going over my top 10 non-partnered Minicons. And then in part 3, I will be going over my top 5 Minicon teams. So we're going to go ahead and jump into my top 10 partnered Minicons. And coming in at number 10, as much as I like this little guy, I'm going to have to give the number 10 spot to Crumple Zone. Crumple Zone here, as you guys know, is the partner Minicon of the Decepticon Cyclonus. What I think is neat about this guy is not only can he turn into a tank, but I think it's pretty neat that you can actually flip him around and he can become an extended cockpit for Cyclonus while he's in his vehicle mode. In addition to that, while you have him attached to the front of him, if you pull the trigger that's on the back on the tail section of Cyclonus, it will actually make the little machine gun pivot back, swivel back and forth, which I think is a pretty neat feature. And then what's also cool is that with Cyclonus, you can take both the Destruction Team Minicons and the Adventure Team Minicons and attach them to the underside of the cab of Cyclonus' vehicle mode and have a similar gimmick that works. So my top 10 spot goes to Crumple Zone. All right, so in my number 9 spot, I had a couple of different options for this one, but I decided to go with this little guy. Not only because, obviously I like the color green, but I think it's pretty neat that his weapon can actually be used by his Decepticon partner. So my number 9 spot goes to Inferno. Inferno turns into a little tank truck with the missile pack on the back. And then, like I said, this can actually be taken off, and then you can use the little pins that are on the side, and you can actually mount it into the arm of Thrust. I think it's also pretty cool that while Thrust is in its vehicle mode, you can actually basically dock Inferno onto the back of Thrust in between the exhausts and in between the engines for his vehicle mode. And then he has the little spring-loaded Minicon panel on his chest, so you can actually fire the rocket while he's attached to Thrust in vehicle mode. So my number 9 spot goes to Inferno. As for my number 8 spot, I chose this Minicon because I think that he had more than one quote-unquote trick that he could use to help his partner out. In some instances, he could provide a speed boost, and in other instances, he could actually provide the ability to fly. So my number 8 spot has to go to Hotshot's partner Minicon, Jolt. Not only do I think it's pretty cool that they have Jolt as a little red helicopter, but I think it's pretty neat that Hotshot's blaster can actually be held by Jolt, and it can also be pinned to the underside of Jolt, where, like in the cartoon, Jolt would fly overhead and he would actually detach it and it would latch onto the hood of Hotshot. I think Jolt, honestly, he's always been one of my favorites because of how he kind of is a little bit like Hotshot, I guess. I'm sure there are people who would disagree with me. But ultimately, Jolt has always been one of my favorites because basically of Hotshot. So my number 8 spot, I got to go give it a Jolt. All right. Moving right down the line, my number 7 spot, I'm going to admit that I know this guy is not technically a Minicon, especially because he's comprised of 2 components, but also because he is not even stamped with a Decepticon symbol, a Minicon insignia. But I got to give the number 7 spot to the Rider for Sideways. The reason I included this one on this list, like I said, I know it's not technically a Minicon, but the reason I did this was because I think it's pretty neat that you can actually split him into two pieces, and the upper half becomes the Autobot head, which can then attach to him. Then the lower half becomes the Decepticon head, which can then attach to him. And then, of course, while Sideways is in vehicle mode, he has a little rider gimmick, which I know in some series of Transformers, they have this as basically a hologram. But I think it's kind of neat that for Transformers Armada, they have a physical rider. Ultimately, Sideways isn't one of my most favorite characters, but I do think it's pretty cool that his partner is basically multi-use. So number seven spot goes to the rider for Sideways. Honestly, one more thing. I don't know if this little guy is actually called Sideways or if he's just basically a minion or whatever. But either way, we'll call him Sideways Jr., I guess. All right, so that's number 7. My number 6 spot, this was actually a pretty easy choice. I know he didn't see a whole lot of action in the Transformers Armada series, but my number 6 spot I have to give to Red Alert's partner Minicon, Long Arm. The biggest reason why I gave Long Arm the number 6 spot was because you really didn't see him a lot as the series progressed. There were a few subsequent episodes where obviously Red Alert would power link with him so he can get the blaster that's off his back, stuff like that. I know there's an episode where I believe it's Smokescreen and Red Alert that took the kids on a camping trip. They ended up in the middle of a landslide, and they had to use Long Arm's crane to tow a line across the Raging River, stuff like that. I haven't watched Transformers Armada for a while, so if some of those details aren't right, I am sorry. But anyway, so my number 6 spot goes to Long Arm. All right, so coming in at number 5, this was actually a pretty easy no-brainer for me. So I gave the number 5 spot to Demolisher's Minicon, Blackout. Blackout has always been one of my favorites because he actually has the ability to pick up other Minicon signals, whereas a lot of the other Minicons really can't unless they're using a special type of sensor equipment. The little radar dish that's on Blackout's back can be used to pick up Minicon signals that are quote unquote dormant but active, kind of like in the show when they pick up a signal right before they find it. That's what I'm talking about. That signal. Overall, I think that the design for Blackout is actually pretty good. Obviously it's a very symmetrical design, which I like with a lot of these figures. So my number 5 spot goes to Blackout. Coming in at number 4, I know this guy did not see any screen time in the Transformers Armada cartoon, but I went ahead and gave him a spot on this top 10 list anyway, because I think it's pretty cool that not only is he a Minicon, but he can transform into a blaster, and then he can also transform into the head of his quote-unquote Autobot partner. So my number 4 spot goes to Rollout. Like I said, Rollout was never actually featured in the cartoon, but I do think it is pretty cool that he can actually flip up into the head of Overload. And then he can also be transformed into a dual-barreled blaster that the other Transformers can use. If I believe I stated this in my Overload video, but I believe that he is actually kind of a reintroduction of the Headmaster series when they were working on Transformers Armada. Overall, I think this is a pretty good design. I think it's really weird that he's got a really bulky body and really tiny arms, but hey, do what you can with what you got, I suppose. So, number 4, Rollout. All right, coming in at number 3, I actually had to, for my top 3, these were actually some pretty difficult choices, but my number 3 choice had to go to Blur's partner Minicon, Incinerator. And I'm going to tell you, it's not just because of the name Incinerator, which I think is a cool name, especially for a dragster, but the reason I gave Incinerator the number 3 spot was because of the unique way that he can actually power link with Blur. Traditionally, the Minicons would link on to one of the little Minicon pegs that's mounted on a character, but he does not do this. He actually he actually fits into a slot on the back end of Blur's vehicle mode, which then allows Blur to fold out some wings, and it gives him an insane speed boost and allows him to actually fly for short distances. This is actually the Minicon that Blur was able to save from the Decepticons in his introductory episode. I don't remember what the name of the episode was, but Blur kind of snuck up behind a rock, and what you do is you see the barrel of his blaster come out, and then he takes a shot, and he actually hits Demolisher in the arm, which makes the Minicon go flying, and then he jumps out from hiding. He transforms. He goes down a cliff, jumps up in the air, transforms in midair, and grabs Incinerator out of the air, and Incinerator activates. So number 3, Incinerator. All right. So now we're down to the number 2 spots. I'm going to admit that number 2 and number 1 are actually the leaders, partner Minicons. Obviously, with these two, it's kind of a no-brainer for me because these two have always been 2 of my absolute favorite Minicons out of every single one that I've owned. You can see a whole bunch of them on the shelf right back there behind me, and then I have a whole bunch on the desk right over here. But these two stand alone, in my opinion. But as much as I like this guy, unfortunately, he kind of fell second. He kind of fell to a close second. So I got to give the number 2 spot to Sparkplug. As much as I absolutely love this character, I think it's pretty cool because he kind of resembles kind of a newer version of Bumblebee from the G1 series, in my opinion. I love that he transformed into a Lamborghini. I love how smooth that his transformation can actually be. And if I remember right, in the series, he was actually the first Minicon to actually speak English, because they even stated that the Minicons weren't programmed to speak, but somehow they were able to learn. I believe it was because of the influence of Rad, Carlos, and Alexis when they were sent back in time to the point where the Minicons were first created by Unicron. I believe their influence was what allowed the Minicons to develop free will, and they were able to escape from the war on Cybertron and all this other stuff. I do think it's pretty cool that Sparkplug was actually able to save Optimus. When he first spoke in an episode, he said lock onto shield after Optimus had managed to knock the Skyboom shield away from Megatron and it fell down a canyon. Sparkplug got in front of Optimus. He put his arms out and he said lock onto shield, and the Skyboom shield actually jumped in front of Sparkplug and Optimus and actually blocked Megatron's attack with the Star Saber, which is how the Autobots started to learn that the Minicons actually did have their own free will. They were actually quote-unquote alive. So number 2, Sparkplug. As for my number 1 spot, if you guys were paying attention, you guys will know that this spot is obviously going to go to Leader 1. I know I'm betting some of you were hoping that it would be Sparkplug or another Minicon, but Leader 1 is actually my number one Minicon that I like for my collection. I'm not saying I side with the Decepticons. I do not. I'm full-blown Autobot the whole way, okay? But ultimately, I think it's pretty cool that this Minicon actually has a whole bunch of different variations of his blaster mode and his attack mode. I think it's pretty cool that you can actually flip out the cannons, and then he can be attached onto the backpack for Megatron and become an extra set of cannons for his full blast mode. You can actually mount this on, if you put him like this, you can actually turn him in, you can actually mount him on Megatron, and he can have shoulder-mounted cannons. If you put his legs out flat, you can mount him on Megatron's arm, so he has a wrist-mounted cannon. There's just a whole bunch of possibilities for this Minicon. I did think it was kind of weird that they just happened to find Megatron's Minicon on the moon, which is the first one they found. It's like, it just seemed kind of random that they did something like that. But anyway, so my number 1 spot goes to Leader 1. All right, guys. Well, there is part 1 of my top Minicon lists of lineups. So what I'll do in part 2 is I will show you my top 10 non-partnered minicons, and then in part 3 I will show you my top 5 minicon teams. So you guys can look forward to those. I'm going to have those coming out hopefully either tonight or tomorrow. So look out for those videos, and until then, bye.